I counted them, 1, 2, 3. By the time his hand connected with my cheek for the 30th time, my lip was split, and the metallic taste of blood filled my mouth. But my heart had turned to absolute ice. My son Bradley thought he was teaching a stubborn old man a lesson in front of his laughing wife. He thought his youth and his rage gave him power. He did not know that while he was busy playing the tough guy, I was mentally signing the eviction notice. I am Garrison Ford. I am 68 years old. I spent 40 years building skyscrapers in Chicago, fighting unions, winter storms, and city corruption. And this is the story of how I sold my son's house while he was sitting at his desk at work, unaware that his life was about to be demolished. If you have ever been betrayed by the very blood you sacrificed everything for, like this video, and subscribe. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from. It was a Tuesday night in February, and the wind off Lake Michigan was sharp enough to cut glass. I parked my 10-year-old sedan 2 blocks away from the Lakeshore Drive mansion because there was no room in the driveway. The driveway was filled with leased Porsches and Range Rovers belonging to people who had never worked a day of hard labor in their lives. I walked against the wind, clutching a small package wrapped in brown paper. It was my son Bradley's 32nd birthday. The house looked magnificent from the outside. It should. I bought it 5 years ago. I paid cash for it after a particularly good year in commercial real estate. I let Bradley and his wife Vanessa live there. I told them it was their home. I never told them that the deed was held by a limited liability company called Bulldog Holdings, solely owned by me. To them, it was a gift. To me, it was a test they were failing miserably. I rang the doorbell. The bass from the music inside was vibrating the heavy oak door. Vanessa opened it. She was 28, beautiful, in a plastic manufactured way, and holding a glass of champagne that cost more than my first car. "Oh, it is you," she said. She did not move aside to let me in immediately. Her eyes scanned my coat. It was a good coat wool, durable, but it was old. It did not fit the aesthetic of her party. "Happy birthday to Bradley," I said, stepping past her before she could block me. The warmth of the house hit me, carrying the scent of expensive perfume and something sweet and chemical. "He is in the living room, Garrison," she said, not calling me Dad. "Try not to embarrass him tonight. He has important clients here." I walked into the living room. It was crowded. I saw Bradley holding court near the fireplace. He looked good on the surface. Expensive suit, perfect haircut, a glass of scotch in his hand. But I know construction. I know how to spot a hairline fracture in a foundation before the building collapses. Bradley was sweating. His eyes were darting around the room, nervous, erratic. He was laughing too loud. I approached him. "Happy birthday, son." The room went quiet. His friends, a collection of sales directors and influencers, looked at me. I was the anomaly, the old man with calloused hands in a room of manicured fingernails. Dad Bradley said, his voice was tight. "You made it." I handed him the package. It was his grandfather's watch, a 1945 mechanical piece that had been in our family for 3 generations. It was not flashy. It did not have diamonds. It was about heritage. It was about time. Bradley took it. He tore the paper. He looked at the old leather case and opened it. He stared at the watch for a second, and then he laughed. A short, cruel bark of a laugh. "Thanks, Dad," he said. He tossed the box onto a side table where empty glasses and used napkins were piled. It slid off the edge and fell into a trash bin filled with discarded wrapping paper. Vanessa giggled. "Oh, Bradley, be nice. Maybe we can sell it at a garage sale." I felt a tightening in my chest, not anger, disappointment. The kind of disappointment that tastes like ash. I walked over and retrieved the watch from the trash. I put it back in my pocket. "Can we talk?" Bradley hissed, grabbing my arm. His grip was hard. Too hard. He dragged me toward his home office, the library. I had built those shelves myself. I had installed that mahogany desk. He shoved me inside and locked the door. The music was muffled now. It was just us. "I need money, Dad," he said. He did not waste time. He did not ask how I was. He went straight to the point. I looked at him. "I retired 3 years ago." "Bradley, you have a job. You live in a $2 million house for free." "It is not enough," he shouted. He began to pace. He looked like a trapped animal. "I owe people bad people. I need $200, $1,000 tonight. $200, $1,000. I sat down in the leather chair. I looked at my son. I saw the tremors in his hands. I saw the dilated pupils. "Gambling," I stated. It was not a question. It was an investment that went wrong. He lied. He always lied. "Just write the check, Dad." "You have it. I know you have it." "You are sitting on a pile of cash from the business?" "I do have it," I said calmly, "but I am not giving it to you. If I give it to you, you will gamble it away by Friday. You need help, Bradley. You need rehab." He stopped pacing. He looked at me with pure hatred. Vanessa slipped into the room from a side door that connected to the master bedroom. She had her phone out. She was recording. "Tell him, Brad," she said, her voice dripping with poison. "Tell the old miser." "You are going to give me that money," Bradley said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Or you are never going to see us again. You are going to die alone in that sad little apartment of yours." I stood up. "I am leaving Bradley." He blocked my path. "You are not leaving until you sign a check." I tried to step around him. He shoved me back into the chair. The force of it knocked the wind out of me. "Sign the check, old man," Vanessa urged from the corner. "Teach him a lesson, babe." I looked at them. My son, my daughter-in-law. They looked like vultures. "No," I said. Bradley's face turned a color I had never seen. It was purple with rage. He grabbed my collar with his left hand. He raised his right hand. "You think you are tough," he screamed. "You think because you poured concrete you are tough. You are nothing. You are a wallet. That is all you are to us." And then he slapped me. It was not a punch. It was a slap. Disrespectful sharp. It stung. My head snapped to the side, one I counted in my head. I looked back at him. "Is that all you have?" I asked quietly. He slapped me again. Harder this time. My glasses flew off my face and skittered across the hardwood floor. "2. Sign it," he screamed. "No. 3, 4, 5. He lost control. He was not hitting me to get the money anymore. He was hitting me because he hated me. He hated that I had earned my wealth and he had to beg for it. He hated that I had integrity and he had none. He was hitting his own conscience. Vanessa was laughing. She was holding the phone steady. "Get a close-up of his face," she said. 6, 7, 8. I did not raise my hand. I did not block him. I sat there. I took it. I needed this. I needed to feel the physical pain to kill the emotional love I still held for him. I needed him to beat the father out of me. 9, 10, 11. My lips split. I tasted copper. Blood dripped onto my white shirt. 12, 13. He was panting now. Sweat was flying off his forehead. He was exerting himself. Beating an old man is hard work. 14, 15. "Why won't you just die?" he screamed. "Why won't you just have a heart attack and leave us the money? It would be so much easier." 17. I focused on a spot on the wall, a painting of a ship in a storm. I had bought that painting in London. It was worth $5,000. I wondered if he knew that. I wondered if he would sell it for poker chips. 18, 19, 20. My left eye was swelling shut. The room was starting to blur, but my mind was crystal clear. It was sharper than it had been in 20 years. 21, 22. Vanessa moved closer. "Kick him out, Brad. He is useless. He is bleeding on the rug." 23, 24, 25. He slowed down. His hand was hurting. He looked at his own palm, red and stinging. He looked at me. I was still sitting upright. I was not crying. I was not begging. 26, 27, 28. He gave me 3 final lazy slaps, backhand, forehand, backhand, just to show contempt. 29. He stepped back, breathing heavy. He wiped his hand on his pants. "Get out," he said. "Get out of my house. Do not come back without the money." I stood up. My legs were shaky, but they held. I picked up my glasses. One lens was cracked. I put them on. The world looked fractured. That was appropriate. I looked at him. I looked at Vanessa. 30, I said. My voice was a croak, but it was steady. What Bradley asked, 30 times. I said, "I will remember that number." I walked to the door. I did not look back. I walked through the party. The guests went silent as they saw me. Blood on my shirt, eyes swelling shut, lips split. I walked past them like a ghost. I opened the front door and stepped out into the snow. The cold was a shock. It froze the blood on my face instantly. I walked to my car. I got in. I did not turn the ignition on immediately. I sat there in the dark, shivering. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. My fingers were stiff. I dialed a number I knew by heart. It rang twice. "Jared," I said. "Garrison, it is 10 hours on a Sunday." "What is wrong?" "Your voice sounds terrible." Jared West, my lawyer, my shark, the man who knew where all the bodies were buried because he had helped me dig the holes legally. "I am activating Clause 13, I said. There was a silence on the other end. A long, heavy silence. Jared knew what Clause 13 was. We had written it into the Bulldog Holdings operating agreement 5 years ago. It was the nuclear option. "Are you sure, Garrison?" Jared asked softly. "Clause 13 is scorched earth." "There is no coming back from that. It involves immediate liquidation." I touched my lip. I looked at the blood on my fingertip. I was just slapped 30 times by my son, Jared. He told me to die. He told me I was just a wallet. "My God," Jared whispered. "Do you want me to call the police?" "No," I said. "Police are for protection." "I do not want protection. I want destruction." "Understood," Jared said. His voice shifted. It became cold. Professional lethal. "What are your instructions?" "The house," I said. "The Lakeshore Drive house. It is technically a rental property owned by Bulldog Holdings. Bradley is a tenant at will. He just violated the terms of the lease by assaulting the landlord." "Correct," Jared said. "We can evict him." "It will take 30 days. "No," I interrupted. "I do not want an eviction. I want it gone. I want to sell it tonight. Tonight, Garrison Real Estate does not work like that." "It does if you sell it to the right people," I said. "Call Bulldog Flippers. Call that group that buys distressed properties for cash the ones who buy teardowns." "You mean the developers who strip the lots?" Jared asked. "They will offer you 50 cents on the dollar. You will lose $1 million in equity." "I do not care about the money," I said. "I want that house sold by noon tomorrow. I want the locks changed before he comes home from work. I want him to put his key in the door and realize he does not own a single brick." "I can make some calls," Jared said. "I can draft the paperwork tonight. If you are willing to take a massive loss, I can have a cash buyer lined up by 900 a.m. "Do it," I said. And Jared, "Yes." Cancel everything else. The credit cards I pay for the car lease under the company, name the insurance, the country club membership, cut the strings, all of them. He is going to drown Garrison. He has no assets. He has a wife, I said grimly. Let us see how long she stays when the credit card declines. I hung up the phone. I started the car. The heater kicked in, blowing warm air onto my frozen hands. I looked at the mansion one last time. I saw the lights. I heard the faint thump of the bass. They were still partying. They were drinking my champagne in my house, celebrating their victory over the old man. Enjoy it, Bradley, I whispered to the empty car. Enjoy the party. because tomorrow the hangover is going to be fatal. I drove away. I did not go to a hospital. I went back to my apartment downtown. I cleaned my own wounds. I put ice on my eye. I stared at myself in the mirror. The face looking back at me was bruised and battered, but the eyes were different. The sadness was gone. The hesitation was gone. I sat at my kitchen table and waited for the sun to come up. I did not sleep. I watched the clock. 1945. My father's watch was still in my pocket. I took it out and set it on the table. It was ticking steady, relentless. At 7:00 a.m., my phone rang. "It was Jared. It is done," he said. I found a buyer, a commercial group called Titan Demolition. They want the land. They do not care about the house. They are wiring the funds at 1,000 a.m. They want possession at 12:02 p.m. Perfect, I said. Garrison Jared warned, "This is going to get ugly. When they take possession, they are going to clear the house. They are not going to pack his things in bubble wrap. They are going to use a dumpster." "That is exactly what I am counting on," I said. I hung up. I stood up and put on a fresh suit. I tied my tie. My fingers were sore, but I managed. I grabbed my cane. I did not need it to walk, but I liked the weight of it. It was made of hickory, solid, heavy. It was Monday morning. Bradley would be at his office, hungover, trying to hide his gambling debts. Vanessa would be sleeping in until noon, dreaming of spending money she did not have. I checked my watch. 8:00 a.m. The countdown had begun. They had 4 hours left in their paradise, and I was going to enjoy every single second of their eviction. I walked out the door into the Chicago morning. The wind was still howling, but I did not feel the cold anymore. I was on a mission, and God help anyone who stood in my way. I arrived at Jared's office at 8:30 a.m. It was a glass tower in the loop. Jared was waiting for me in the conference room. He had a stack of documents 3 in thick. "You look like you went 12 rounds with a heavyweight," he said, looking at my face. "I feel like I won," I replied. He slid the papers across the table. This is the bill of sale. This is the transfer of deed. This is the immediate termination of the lease agreement due to criminal conduct. Sign here, here, and here." I signed. My signature was firm. Garrison Ford, Garrison Ford, Garrison Ford. With each stroke of the pen, I was severing a limb. "The wire transfer is set," Jared said. "Once the money hits our escrow account, the property belongs to Titan Demolition. They have a security team on standby." "Good." I said, "There is one more thing." Jared said. He pulled out a separate file. I ran a background check on the debts Bradley mentioned. "It is worse than you thought how bad he owes $300,000 to a syndicate out of Cicero. These are not banks, Garrison. These are loan sharks. If he does not pay, they will hurt him." I looked at the skyline of Chicago. I thought about the 30 slaps. I thought about the hate in his eyes. "He is a grown man, Jared. He made his choices." "You are leaving him to the wolves," Jared said quietly. "No," I said, "I am just stopping feeding the wolves for him." My phone buzzed. It was a text from Bradley. "Dad, sorry about last night. I was drunk. Stress is killing me. We need to talk about that check. I really need it today. Love you, love you." The audacity. He slapped me 30 times and texted me, "Love you," because he needed money. I showed the text to Jared. "Do not reply," Jared advised. "I am not going to," I said. "I am going to let him think I am broken. I am going to let him think I am scrambling to get his money. Let him sit at his desk and sweat." At 9:55 a.m., the wire transfer came through. The house was sold. It was no longer mine. It was no longer his. It belonged to a corporation that viewed it as a tear-down lot. At 1,000 a.m., I got into my car with Jared. We followed the Titan Demolition team. They were driving 3 large black SUVs and a massive dump truck. They looked like a military convoy. We drove north to Lakeshore Drive. The snow was falling harder now. It covered the streets in a white blanket, hiding the dirt, hiding the cracks. but it could not hide what was about to happen. We pulled up to the mansion at 10:45 a.m. The house was quiet, the curtains were drawn. Vanessa was inside sleeping. The lead security officer from Titan Demolition, a man named Brutus who looked like he ate bricks for breakfast, walked up to my car. "Mr. Ford?" he asked. "That is me. We have the deed. We have the right of possession. Do you want to be the one to knock or should we?" "You do it," I said. "I will watch from here." Brutus nodded. He signaled his team. 4 men in tactical gear walked up the driveway. They did not ring the doorbell. They did not knock politely. Brutus took out a master key tool. He popped the lock in 5 seconds. The door swung open. The alarm started blaring, a high-pitched scream that cut through the morning air. I rolled down my window. I wanted to hear it. Minutes later, I heard a different kind of scream. It was Vanessa. "Get out! Get out!" "Who are you?" I watched as the security team started bringing things out. They did not carry boxes. They carried armfuls of clothes, shoes, electronics. They walked to the curb and dumped them in the snow. A Gucci bag landed in a slush puddle. A PlayStation 5 crashed onto the concrete. A fur coat was tossed onto a bush. Vanessa ran out the front door. She was wearing a silk robe and slippers. She was screaming hysterically. She tried to grab Brutus's arm. He swatted her away like a fly. "Ma'am, this is private property," he boomed. "You are trespassing. Remove yourself from the premises or you will be arrested." "This is my house," she shrieked. "My husband owns this house." Brutus laughed. He held up the deed. "Nobody named Ford owns this house. Lady Titan Demolition owns it, and we are clearing the debris." Debris. That is what he called their life. Vanessa pulled out her phone. She was shaking. She dialed Bradley. I sat in my car warm and dry and watched the show. My phone did not ring. Bradley was calling her, not me. He was about to find out that his bad day was turning into a catastrophe. The dump truck backed into the driveway. The men started tossing furniture into it. The expensive Italian leather sofa I had paid for gone. The dining table gone. It was ruthless. It was efficient. It was beautiful. Suddenly, a black BMW screeched around the corner. It was Bradley. He had left work. He drove up onto the lawn tires spinning in the snow. He jumped out of the car, leaving the door open. "What are you doing?" he screamed. He ran toward Brutus. "Stop! Stop it!" I watched my son. He looked small. He looked powerless. Brutus stepped in front of him. He crossed his massive arms. "Back off, pal." "That is my stuff," Bradley yelled. "Not anymore," Brutus said. "Anything left in the property after transfer of ownership is considered abandoned. We are trashing it." Bradley looked around frantically. He saw the pile of clothes in the snow. He saw his wife crying on the sidewalk, and then he saw me. He saw my sedan parked across the street. He saw me sitting in the driver's seat watching him. He froze. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He ran across the street. He slipped on the ice, fell, scrambled up, and slammed his hands onto my car window. "Dad. Dad, stop them. What did you do?" I rolled the window down 2 in. Just enough to hear him clearly. Just enough to let the cold air hit his face. "I sold the house, Bradley," I said. "You what?" "You cannot sell my house." "It was never your house," I said. "It was my house, and I sold it. The new owners are very efficient, aren't they?" "You are crazy. Where are we supposed to live? Where am I supposed to go?" I looked at him. I looked at the bruise forming on my own face in the rearview mirror. "I don't know," I said, "but I hear the homeless shelters fill up fast in this weather." "You better start running." I rolled the window up. He pounded on the glass. He screamed. He cried. I put the car in drive. I pulled away slowly, leaving him standing in the exhaust fumes, watching his life being hauled away in a dump truck. Act 1 was over, but I was not done. Not even close. Because while he was losing his roof, I was about to make sure he lost his job, his reputation, and his freedom. The 30 slaps were just the down payment. Now I was coming to collect the interest. The morning sun over Chicago offered no warmth, just a blinding white glare that bounced off the snow and pierced through my cracked glasses lens. I sat in the leather chair across from Jared West, my lawyer, and the only man in this city I trusted with the location of the bodies. My face was a map of purple and blue bruises, the physical receipt of the 30 slaps my son had gifted me the night before. My left eye was swollen half shut, making Jared look like a blurry figure in a gray suit, but I did not need perfect vision to see the concern etched into his features. He was holding the property deed for the Lakeshore Drive mansion, the one Bradley had called home for 5 years, the one he had boasted about to his friends, the one he believed was his birthright. Jared looked at me, and then at the document, and then back at me. Garrison, you need to understand that even with an eviction notice, the law favors the tenant. In Illinois, it could take 6 months to get him out, especially during winter. You cannot just sell a house that has people living in it. I leaned forward and the movement sent a sharp jolt of pain through my ribs, reminding me why I was here. Jared, look at page 14, paragraph 3, subsection C of the occupancy agreement. Jared frowned and flipped the pages. He adjusted his reading glasses. He was silent for a long minute as he read the fine print. I saw his eyebrows shoot up. He looked at me with a mixture of shock and professional admiration. "This is not a standard lease," Jared whispered. "This is a conditional occupancy license based on good conduct." "Exactly," I said, my voice raspy. 5 years ago, when I handed Bradley the keys, he was so excited to pop the champagne and post photos on Instagram that he did not read what he was signing. He thought it was just boring paperwork for the insurance. He never noticed that the house is owned by Bulldog Holdings LLC, a company where I am the sole managing member. And he definitely did not notice the clause that states the license to occupy is immediately revoked without notice if the occupant commits any act of physical violence against the managing member. Jared let out a low whistle. "You trapped him before he even moved in?" "I did not trap him, Jared. I insured myself. I built skyscrapers for 40 years. You never pour a foundation without accounting for the possibility of an earthquake." Bradley was always a tremor waiting to happen. Last night he finally caused the earthquake. "So legally he is trespassing right now," Jared said, tapping the paper. "Legally he is a stranger in my house," I confirmed, "and I do not want to evict him. Eviction implies he has rights. I want to liquidate the asset. I want that house gone today." Jared sighed and leaned back. "Okay, Garrison, you have the legal right, but finding a buyer in 8 hours who can pay cash and is willing to deal with a hostile occupant is impossible. You need a unicorn." "No," I corrected him. "I do not need a unicorn. I need a bulldog. Call Mike Vance." Jared froze. "Mike Vance runs Bulldog Flippers." "They do not buy luxury mansions, Garrison. They buy crack houses and foreclosures. They buy properties sight unseen for 50 cents on the dollar, and they gut them. They are ruthless. Call him," I repeated. Jared picked up the phone. He put it on speaker. The line rang 3 times before a growly voice answered. "This is Mike. Mike, this is Jared West. I have Garrison Ford with me. We have a property." "I'm listening," Mike said. "Lakeshore Drive. $4,000 square F market value is $2.2 million. Silence on the other end. Then a scoff. "We do not touch stuff that high-end, Jared. We flip volume, not museums." $800,000 cash, I said, leaning toward the phone. The silence on the other end was heavier this time. It was the silence of a shark smelling blood in the water. "Who is this?" Mike asked. "Garrison Ford. I bought the property for cash 5 years ago. Title is clean. It is held by my LLC. I want to sell it to you for $800,000. But the wire has to hit my account by noon today." What is the catch, Garrison? Mike asked suspiciously. There is always a catch. Is it built on a toxic waste dump? The catch is the occupants, I said. My son and his wife are currently inside, or rather their stuff is. They do not know it is being sold. You will have to handle the clean out. And Mike, when I say clean out, I mean, I do not care if you use a shovel or a flamethrower. Mike laughed a dry barking sound. So you want a demolition crew, not a moving service. I want the problem gone, I said. I can have the money wired in an hour, Mike said, but I need to inspect the exterior first. I need to make sure the building is still standing. Go now, I said, but do not knock. Do not alert them. Just look and call us back. I hung up the phone. I checked my watch. It was 9:15 a.m. I pulled out my tablet and opened the security app connected to the smart cameras I had installed in the house 5 years ago. Another detail Bradley had forgotten or was too lazy to change. I had admin access to everything. I cycled through the cameras. The kitchen was a mess. Empty champagne bottles and cake crumbs everywhere. The living room looked like a frat house after a bender. But the house was quiet. I checked the garage camera. Bradley's car was gone. He had gone to work. Of course he had. He was a sales director and he had quotas to meet, especially if he needed money to pay off the gambling debts he had screamed about last night. He was sitting in his glass office right now nursing a hangover and probably texting me apologies thinking he could manipulate me like he always did. I checked the master bedroom camera. Empty. The bed was unmade. I checked the driveway camera. Vanessa's white Range Rover had left at 8:45 a.m. I opened the Find My Friends app. She had forgotten that she added me to her location sharing 3 years ago, when we went on a family trip and she wanted me to pick her up from the airport. She never removed me. Her dot was pulsing on the map at the Sanctuary Spa downtown. It was Monday morning. Her husband was drowning in debt. Her father-in-law had been beaten bloody in her home, and she was getting a hot stone massage. The audacity was breathtaking. It was almost impressive how disconnected from reality they were. They truly believed that consequences were things that happened to other people. They thought the Ford family name was a magic shield that would protect them from the rain. They did not realize that I was the one holding the umbrella and I had just closed it. I looked at Jared. They are both out. The house is empty. Jared nodded slowly. He was drafting the bill of sale on his laptop. His fingers flew across the keys. He was a professional, but I could see he was unsettled. He had handled divorces and corporate hostile takeovers, but he had never seen a father clinically dismantle his son's life like this. Garrison, are you sure you do not want to keep the equity? Jared asked without looking up. You are throwing away over $1 million in profit. We could list it and sell it properly. It is not profit, Jared, I said, staring at the screen where my empty house sat, silent and waiting. It is the cost of war. If I list it, it takes months. If I list it, they have time to beg, to squat, to fight. I do not want the money. I have plenty of money. I want the shock. I want them to come home tonight expecting to sleep in their silk sheets and find out they do not even have a door to unlock. That realization is worth $1 million to me. The phone rang. It was Mike. I am outside. He said, nice place. Brickwork is solid. Roof looks new. You are crazy for selling this at $800, but I am not going to stop you. I have the wire ready. Send it. I said, one condition, Mike said, I bring my own security. If your kid shows up and tries to start something, my guys handle it. I do not want any lawsuits from him claiming we broke his nose. If he shows up, I said, you tell him to call me. And Mike. Whatever is inside the house, furniture, electronics, clothes, considers it a bonus. Keep it, sell it, burn it. I do not want to see a single item ever again. Done, Mike said. I hung up. Jared printed the documents. The sound of the printer was rhythmic, soothing. It sounded like a countdown. I signed the papers. My hand did not shake. My face throbbed with every heartbeat, a dull ache that synchronized with the scratching of the pen on paper. At 10:43 a.m., Jared's computer pinged. "Funds received," he said softly. "The wire cleared." "It is done," I said. Jared looked at me. "Technically, Bulldog Flippers owns the property now. They can legally change the locks immediately." "Tell them to proceed," I said. "Tell them to board it up if they have to." I want it to look like a fortress by sunset. I stood up and walked to the window of Jared's office, looking down at the busy Chicago streets. Somewhere down there, Bradley was sitting in a meeting, pretending to be a success. Somewhere down there, Vanessa was relaxing in a robe, pretending she was royalty. They had 8 hours. 8 hours until they returned to their castle and found the drawbridge raised and the archers waiting. I touched the bandage on my cheek. 30 slaps, I whispered to the glass. I pulled out my phone. I had one more call to make. Not to Bradley, not to Vanessa, but to the private investigator I had kept on retainer for my business dealings. "Find out who holds Bradley's gambling debt," I told the investigator. "I want names, I want amounts. And I want to know exactly what happens to people who do not pay them. I was not going to pay his debts, but I wanted to know exactly how deep the water was before I watched him drown." The house was just the beginning. By the time the sun went down today, Bradley would be homeless. By the end of the week, I intended for him to be jobless. I sat back down and closed my eyes, waiting for the clock to tick. The silence in the room was heavy, but for the first time in 24 hours, the pain in my face felt bearable. It was the anesthesia of action. I was no longer a victim. I was the architect of their ruin. The convoy of black SUVs and the massive dump truck rolled onto the pristine pavement of Lakeshore Drive like a funeral procession for a life that was not quite dead yet. I sat in the passenger seat of Jared's car, watching the steam rise from the exhaust pipes in the frigid Chicago air. It was 10:46 a.m. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of hushed silence that only money can buy, where the loudest sound is usually a landscaping crew or a delivery van. Today, the loudest sound would be the destruction of my son's delusions. Mike Vance, the owner of Bulldog Flippers, stepped out of the lead truck. He looked exactly like the kind of man you hire when you want a problem to disappear, not when you want it solved. He wore a heavy canvas jacket and steel-toed boots that crunched loudly on the salted driveway. He signaled to his crew. 8 men piled out. They were not wearing uniforms with polite name tags. They were wearing hoodies, tactical vests, and expressions of absolute indifference. They carried heavy-duty trash bags, snow shovels, and crowbars. I got out of the car. My cane sank slightly into the snow. The pain in my face was a dull, throbbing rhythm, a constant reminder of why we were here. Jared stayed in the car on a conference call, preparing the legal firewall for the inevitable backlash. But I needed to be inside. I needed to see it. Mike walked up to the front door. He did not bother looking for a hide-a-key. He did not check if it was unlocked. He jammed a heavy demolition tool into the jamb, and with one violent, efficient jerk, the wood splintered and the door swung open. The house alarm screamed instantly. It was a piercing shriek designed to panic intruders, but Mike's crew did not even flinch. They walked in as if they were entering a grocery store. I followed them. The inside of the house smelled like stale champagne, an expensive cologne, the lingering scent of last night's party. Red plastic cups were scattered on the marble foyer. A half-eaten cake sat on the antique console table. I had bought them as a housewarming gift. It was a snapshot of a life lived without consequences. "Clear it!" Mike shouted over the alarm. "Everything goes. If it is not nailed down, it is trash. If it is nailed down, pry it up." The crew moved like locusts. They split up, heading for the living room, the kitchen, and the stairs. I stood in the foyer watching the dismantling of 5 years of my generosity. One of the men walked past me carrying the 60-inch television from the living room. He did not unplug the cords carefully. He ripped them out of the wall, leaving jagged holes in the drywall. He walked to the front door and tossed the TV into the snowbank outside like it was a frisbee. Another man was sweeping the contents of the kitchen counters into a black trash bag. The espresso machine, the designer toaster, the crystal wine glasses, crash, smash, gone. I walked up the stairs slowly, my hand trailing on the banister. I could hear the sounds of destruction coming from the master bedroom. This was Vanessa's sanctuary. I pushed the door open. 2 men were in the walk-in closet. It was a room bigger than my first apartment, filled floor to ceiling with Vanessa's vanity. Rows of designer shoes, handbags that cost more than a semester of college, racks of clothes with tags still on them. Bag it. Mike's voice boomed from the hallway. Donate it all. The shelter downtown needs coats. The men started grabbing armfuls of silk and cashmere. They stuffed Birkin bags into garbage sacks next to dirty laundry. They took pairs of Louis Vuitton heels and tossed them into a cardboard box labeled Goodwill. There was no sorting. There was no care. A $10,000 dress was treated with the same reverence as a used tissue. I watched a man grab Vanessa's jewelry box. He dumped it upside down into a bag. Necklaces, tangled earrings scattered. It was a violent eraser of her identity. Vanessa defined herself by these things. Without them, she was just a girl from the suburbs with a bad attitude. Now she was a girl with nothing. I left them to their work and walked down the hall to the guest room which Bradley had converted into his man cave. This was where he hid when reality got too heavy. It was dark, smelling of stale smoke and sweat. Posters of movies he had never seen lined the walls. A gaming setup that rivaled NASA's control center dominated the corner. Mike followed me in. Nice toys, he grunted. Trash it? I said. Mike nodded to one of his guys. The man grabbed the monitors and the console and carried them out. I walked over to the closet in the corner. Bradley thought he was clever. He thought he had secrets. But I had built this house. I knew every inch of it. I knew that behind the false panel in the closet there was a wall safe. I had installed it myself years ago, thinking he might use it to store deeds or bonds or maybe family photos. Open it, Mike, I said, pointing to the panel. Mike didn't ask for the combination. He pulled a drill from his belt. 2 minutes of grinding noise. Later, the lock mechanism sparked and the heavy steel door swung open. I expected to find cash. I expected to find maybe some chips from the casino. The safe was almost empty. There was no money. Of course there wasn't. Bradley burned money faster than he could earn it. Instead, there was a stack of papers bound by a rubber band. I reached in and took them. My hands were shaking slightly, not from cold, but from adrenaline. I walked over to the window where the winter light was stronger. I snapped the rubber band and began to read. The first few pages were what I expected. Markers I used from underground casinos in Cicero and Joliet. Handwritten notes on napkins signed with shaky scrolls, promising to pay $50,000 here, $20,000 there, 20. The interest rates scribbled in the margins were astronomical. These were not debts you paid off. These were debts you died for. I flipped through them. The total was staggering. He was in deeper than I had imagined. He wasn't just drowning. He was already on the ocean floor. But it was the document at the bottom of the stack that made my blood run cold. It stopped my breath in my throat. It was a thick, formal document in a blue folder, a life insurance policy. I opened it. The policyholder was me, Garrison Ford. I scanned the details. It was a term life policy taken out 2 years ago. The coverage amount was $5 million, but I had never signed this. I looked at the signature at the bottom. It was my name, but it wasn't my hand. It was a forgery, a good one, but a forgery nonetheless. Bradley had practiced. He had traced my signature from the birthday checks I sent him. And there in the section marked primary beneficiary was his name, Bradley Ford. I stared at the paper, the world around me, The sound of the crew smashing furniture, the alarm blaring, the wind howling outside, it all faded into a buzzing silence. He was betting on my death. He wasn't just waiting for me to die, he was banking on it. He had taken out a policy on his own father, likely paying the premiums with the money I gave him for his mortgage. He was keeping me alive financially so he could cash out when I died physically. The 30 slaps suddenly took on a new meaning. They weren't just a tantrum. They were frustration. "Why won't you just die?" he had screamed last night. It wasn't a figure of speech. It was a business complaint. I was taking too long to expire. My continued existence was inconvenient for his cash flow. I felt a wave of nausea. I had to lean against the wall. Mike stepped closer. "You okay, Mr. Ford?" I handed him the folder. "Look at this." Mike read it. He let out a low whistle. "That is cold. That is ice cold. The kid bet against the house, and the house is you." "He forged my signature," I whispered. "He has been paying for this policy for 2 years, waiting for me to have a heart attack or a stroke or maybe getting impatient enough to cause one." I thought about the stress he put me on constantly, the late-night calls for money, the manufactured crisis. He wasn't asking for help. He was trying to spike my blood pressure. "Pack it up." I said, my voice hard as granite. "What about the rest of the stuff?" Mike asked, looking at the few remaining items in the room. "Everything," I said. "Leave nothing. I want this house stripped to the studs. I want the copper wiring out of the walls if you have time. I want him to walk into a shell." I took the papers. I folded them and put them into my inside pocket next to my heart, which was currently hardening into something unrecognizable. This was no longer just about teaching a lesson. This was no longer about tough love. This was self-defense. My son was a predator. A clumsy, desperate predator, but a predator nonetheless, and I had been the prey. I walked out of the room. I walked down the stairs. The house was already transforming. The living room was empty. The rugs were gone, rolled up and thrown into the truck. The curtains were torn down, pooling on the floor like dead skins. In the kitchen, the crew was emptying the refrigerator. They were tossing bottles of expensive wine and jars of gourmet sauce into a trash can. The sound of breaking glass was constant, rhythmic. I walked out the front door. The cold air hit my face again, but this time it felt cleansing. The dump truck was almost full. A mountain of designer clothes, electronics, and furniture sat piled high, ready for the landfill. It was a monument to waste, a monument to their vanity. Jared rolled down his window as I approached the car. "Is it done?" I held up the insurance policy. Jared took it. He read it quickly. His face went pale. "Felony fraud," he said. "Insurance fraud, identity theft, Garrison. This changes everything. This isn't a civil dispute anymore. This is criminal. Keep it safe," I said. "We will use it later. Right now, I just want to watch the end of the show." I got into the car. We sat there in silence, watching the bulldog crew finish the job. They moved with brutal efficiency. Within an hour, the house was empty. It echoed. It was just a shell of drywall and timber. Mike Vance walked out last. He was holding a set of heavy padlocks and sheets of plywood. He walked over to the windows. His men drilled the plywood into the frames. The sound of the drills was loud and final. They covered the bay windows overlooking the lake. They covered the front door's glass panels. The house went blind. Then Mike took the padlock. He looped a heavy chain through the door handles. He snapped the lock shut. He walked over to my car and tapped on the window. "Secured," he said. "Nobody's getting in there without a tank." "Thank you, Mike," I said. "My pleasure. What about the stuff in the truck?" "You want to sort through it? Maybe save some family photos." I thought about the photos. Photos of Bradley graduating. Photos of his wedding to Vanessa where I paid for the open bar. Photos of a family, that I thought existed, but was really just a long con. Burn it, I said, or dump it. I don't care, just get it away from me. Mike nodded. He signaled the driver. The massive truck engine roared to life. Black smoke puffed into the gray sky. The convoy began to move. They pulled away from the curb, leaving deep tracks in the snow. I watched them go. I watched my son's life disappear around the corner, heading for the city dump. I looked back at the house. It stood dark and silent, boarded up like a plague house. It looked dead. It was perfect. "Let's go, Jared," I said. "Where to?" Jared asked. "To the precinct," I said. "I want to file a report about a stolen identity, and then I want to get a steak. I'm hungry." As we drove away, I checked my phone. No calls from Bradley yet. He was still at work, still thinking he was safe, still thinking he had a home to go to. He had no idea that his landlord, his bank, and his father had just foreclosed on his entire existence. The papers in my pocket felt heavy. They were the nail in the coffin. He had bet on my death. Now he was going to have to live with my life. And I intended to live for a very long time just to spite him. The purge was complete. Now it was time for the silence. The long, cold silence before the scream. I leaned my head back against the seat and watched the city pass by. I touched the watch in my pocket. It was still ticking. My time wasn't up. His was. I sat in a high-backed leather booth at Gibson's Bar and Steakhouse, watching the condensation slide down the side of my Scotch glass. The restaurant was dimly lit, filled with the low hum of business deals and political maneuvering. It was a place for power, not for weakness. But as my phone vibrated on the white tablecloth displaying the name Bradley, I prepared to give the greatest performance of my life. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. I wanted him to picture me unconscious or maybe dead. I wanted his pulse to spike. I wanted him to taste the panic of his golden goose potentially expiring before laying the golden egg. On the 4th ring I picked up, I did not say hello. I just let out a ragged, wet cough that rattled deep in my chest. It was easy to fake because my ribs actually felt like they had been kicked by a mule. Dad Bradley's voice cracked through the speaker. "Dad, are you there? Oh God, please tell me you are okay." I closed my eyes, leaning my head back against the booth. I conjured the image of a frail, broken old man, the man he thought I was. Bradley. I whispered, my voice trembling and weak. I am here. Where are you, Dad? I have been calling and calling. I went by your apartment, but you weren't there. Vanessa is freaking out. We are so worried, liar. He wasn't worried about my health. He was worried that if I wasn't found, his $200,000 check would vanish into the ether of probate court. I am at the hospital, son. I lied. My voice sounded thin, pitiful. St. Luke's the emergency room. They are running scans. My head. I can't see straight, Bradley. Everything is blurry. There was a pause on the other end. I could hear the background noise of his office phones ringing, people typing. He was at his desk, probably huddled in a corner, trying to keep his voice down so his coworkers wouldn't hear him begging his battered father for cash. Jesus, Dad, Bradley said, and for a second he almost sounded human. I am so sorry. Last night I don't know what happened. I snapped, the stress. These guys are pressuring me, Dad. They threatened to hurt Vanessa. I just lost it. It won't happen again. I swear it was the classic abuser's anthem. It wasn't me. It was the stress. It won't happen again. I'd heard it 1,000 times before, usually followed by a request for a loan to cover a margin call or a car repair. I know, son, I wheezed, acting the part of the battered codependent parent. I know you didn't mean it. You are a good boy deep down. I almost gagged saying it. The scotch burned my throat, washing away the taste of the lie. Dad, look. I can come down there, Bradley said, his voice shifting gears. urgency creeping in. I can come to the hospital right now. We can talk to the doctors together. No, I said quickly. Too quickly. I had to dial it back. No, Bradley? They gave me something. Morphine. I think I am drifting. If you come here now, I won't make sense. I need to sleep. They said I need to sleep for a few hours before the neurologist sees me. But Dad, the deadline Bradley pressed. The guys, they said 5 Center p.m. If I don't have the money by 5, they are going to come to the house. They are going to hurt us. He was using fear now. He was trying to weaponize my protective instinct. He didn't know that instinct had been surgically removed at 10:45 a.m. that morning, along with his furniture. I have the checkbook here, Bradley. I stammered, playing the confused victim. It is in my jacket pocket, but my hand is shaking so bad. I can't hold a pen right now. I can help you sign it, he said, desperate. Just tell me what room. I will drive over. It will take 20 minutes. I checked my watch. It was 1:15 p.m. If he left now, he would drive past the house. He might see the boarded up windows. He might see the bulldog trucks finishing up. I needed him anchored at his desk downtown. I needed 2 more hours for Mike Vance to finish welding the steel security doors he had recommended for the back entrance. Do not come yet, I said, putting a tremor of panic into my voice. Please, son. Seeing you right now? I think it would upset me too much. My blood pressure is too high. The doctor said if it goes any higher, I could stroke out. Do you want that? No, of course not. Bradley backpedaled. Okay, you rest. I just need a little time. I said stay at work. Stay there. Let me close my eyes for 2 hours. I will call you at 3:30 if I feel better. If the medicine works, maybe you can meet me then. Not at the hospital. Maybe at the bank. The bank, the magic word. I heard his breathing change. He saw the finish line. He thought he had me. He thought the old man was folding just like always. Okay, Dad, he said. 3:30, I will wait for your call. I love you, Dad. Get some rest. I hung up. I placed the phone face down on the table. I love you, Dad. The words hung in the air, heavy with hypocrisy. He loved the checkbook, he loved the safety net, he loved the idea of me, but he despised the reality of me. I signaled the waiter. Another scotch, please, and bring the steak. Rare. I had bought myself 2 hours for the cement to dry on his new reality. I pulled up the security feed on my tablet again. The house was unrecognizable. The windows were covered in thick marine-grade plywood painted black to blend in with the night. The front door was gone, replaced by a heavy steel security door that looked like it belonged on a bank vault. Mike Vance wasn't kidding. He was turning the mansion into a fortress. I saw a locksmith installing a new digital keypad on the garage. Bradley's remote clicker would be useless. His key would be a piece of scrap metal. I took a bite of my steak. It was tender, perfectly cooked. I chewed slowly, savoring the flavor. My jaw clicked with every bite, a souvenir from the 30th slap, but I ignored it. At 2:00 p.m., my private investigator texted me. Subject Bradley Ford debt holder, Sergei Vulov Cicero Syndicate amount $285,000 principal plus VIG status delinquent. Note Vulov is not patient. He breaks thumbs for late fees. He takes collateral for defaults. I stared at the screen. $285,000. He had lied to me even while begging. He told me 200. He was going to take my money and still be short. He was going to jamble the rest, trying to make up the difference and lose it all. He was a dead man walking. And he wanted to drag me into the grave with him. I deleted the text. I was not going to pay Vulov. I was not going to negotiate. That was Bradley's mess. He wanted to be a big shot with his high roller friends. Now he could deal with the big shot consequences. At 3:00 p.m., I asked for the check. I paid with my black card. I tipped the waiter $100. "Thank you, Mr. Ford," the waiter said. "You look like you have been through a war, sir." I touched the bruise on my cheekbone. It was throbbing, pulsing in time with the city. "I have son," I said, standing up and buttoning my coat. But the war is over. Now comes the surrender. I walked out of the restaurant and into the cold afternoon light. The wind had picked up whipping snow around the skyscrapers. It was a brutal, unforgiving city. It didn't care about your excuses. It didn't care if you were stressed or drunk or entitled. It only cared about what you could build and what you could hold on to. Bradley couldn't hold on to anything. Not his money, not his temper, not his family. I got into my car. I checked the time. 3:25 p.m. It was time to make the call, but not the call he was expecting. I wasn't going to call him to meet at the bank. I wasn't going to call him to come to the hospital. I was going to ghost him. I turned my phone on silent. I tossed it onto the passenger seat. Let him sit there. Let him stare at his phone. Let him watch the clock tick past 3:30, then 3:45, then for Saburo. Let the panic set in. Let him realize that silence is the loudest sound in the world when you are waiting for a lifeline that has already been cut. I started the engine and drove toward the lake. I wanted to be parked down the street when he finally gave up and drove home. I wanted to see his face when he pulled into the driveway and realized that his key didn't just fail to open the door, it failed to open his entire future. The stage was set. The props were in place. The audience of one was ready. Act 3 was about to begin, and this time there would be no intermission. The black winter sky hung low over the neighborhood, suffocating the streetlights in a heavy gloom. I sat in my rental car parked 3 houses down. The engine off the windows cracked just enough to let the biting wind carry the sound to me. It was 600 p.m., the witching hour. My face throbbed a dull rhythmic ache under the bandages, but my mind was razor sharp, focusing on the driveway of the mansion that was no longer ours. A pair of headlights cut through the darkness. Bradley's BMW swerved around the corner, driving too fast on the icy road. He pulled into the driveway, tires crunching on the salted concrete. A moment later, Vanessa's white Range Rover followed, pulling in right behind him. They had arrived together, likely meeting at the end of the street, to present a united front for whatever confrontation they thought they were about to have with me. I watched them get out. Bradley slammed his door. He looked disheveled, his expensive coat unbuttoned, despite the freezing wind. Vanessa was holding a shopping bag from the spa. Her hair perfectly blown out her face, a mask of annoyance. They walked toward the house and then they stopped. The security floodlights I had paid for illuminated the scene with a harsh, clinical glare. The house looked like a tomb. The beautiful bay windows were gone, covered by sheets of black painted marine plywood, bolted directly into the frames. The front door, with its custom leaded glass, was hidden behind a slab of gray steel, a heavy-duty security door that looked like the entrance to a bunker. What the hell? Bradley's voice carried over the wind. Vanessa dropped her bag in the snow. Brad. What is that? Why is the house boarded up? Bradley didn't answer. He ran up the steps. He fumbled in his pocket and pulled out his keys. He jammed the key toward where the lock should have been, but the steel door had no keyhole. The digital keypad was gone, ripped out and replaced by a smooth metal plate. He rattled the heavy steel handle. It didn't budge. It was solid, immovable. "Open the door," he shouted, pounding his fist against the metal. Dad, I know you're in there. Open the damn door." Vanessa ran up behind him. She was shivering in her thin coat. "My clothes," she shrieked. "My jewelry. Brad, get us inside. It is freezing." Bradley turned his anger on the house. He kicked the door. A hollow clang rang out, echoing down the quiet street. He ran to the living room window and clawed at the plywood, trying to find a grip to rip it down. "This is my house," he screamed, his voice cracking. "You cannot lock me out." He ran back to his car and popped the trunk. He pulled out a tire iron. "Do not do it, son," I whispered from the darkness of my car. "Do not make it worse." He didn't hear me. He marched back to the front door and swung the iron with all his strength. Clang! The sound was violent, ugly. He swung again, hitting the steel frame. That was the trigger. The alarm system I had installed didn't just beep, it roared. A high-pitched, oscillating siren erupted from the eaves of the house, tearing through the silence of the neighborhood. Lights flashed strobe-like, disorienting and blinding. Vanessa screamed, covering her ears, crouching down on the porch. Suddenly, a black SUV that had been idling at the end of the block roared up the driveway, blocking their cars in. 2 men jumped out. They weren't police. They were tight in security, dressed in tactical black with vests and utility belts. They moved with the precision of soldiers. "Drop the weapon!" one of them shouted, his hand resting on the taser at his hip. Bradley spun around, tire iron raised chest heaving. "Get off my property!" "Who are you? Drop it now, or we will neutralize you," the guard commanded. His voice was calm, robotic. Bradley hesitated, then threw the tire iron into the snow. "It is my house," he yelled, pointing a shaking finger at the boarded-up windows. "My father owns this house. I live here. You are trespassing." The lead guard stepped into the light. He didn't look intimidated. He looked bored. He reached into his vest and pulled out a folded document protected by a plastic sleeve. "Mr. Bradley Ford." "I assume," the guard said. "Yes, I am calling the cops. You're going to jail." The guard held up the document. "This is a deed of ownership, notarized and filed at 2:14 p.m. today with the Cook County clerk." Bradley squinted at the paper. "What? This property is no longer owned by Bulldog Holdings?" the guard stated. "It is the property of Titan Demolition Group." Bradley snatched the paper. He stared at it. His eyes darted across the legal jargon, the timestamps, the signatures. "Sold?" he whispered. His face went white, ghostly pale under the floodlights. "He sold it." He looked up at the guard. "He can't sell it. It is mine. It is my trust fund. It is a tear down." The guard said, cold as ice. "We bought the lot. The structure is scheduled for demolition on Thursday." "Demolition?" Vanessa screamed, standing up. Her face was twisted in horror. "What about our things? My fur coats, my wedding dress, our furniture?" The guard shrugged. The property was sold as his vacant possession. Anything left inside at the time of transfer was deemed abandoned refuse. "It has been cleared." "Cleared?" Bradley choked out. "Dumped," the guard clarified. "The house is empty shell. There is nothing in there but dust." Bradley fell back against the steel door, sliding down until he hit the cold concrete porch. He looked like a puppet whose strings had been cut. "He did it," he muttered. "He actually did it." He looked around wildly, his eyes manic. He looked at the boarded windows, the guards, the black SUV blocking his escape. And then he looked at the street. The reflection of the street lamp hit my windshield. He saw me. He scrambled to his feet, slipping on the ice, flailing. He ran down the driveway past the guards, who let him go, knowing he was powerless. He ran toward my car. "Dad!" He screamed. He slammed his hands onto my driver's side window. His face was inches from mine, separated by the glass. I could see the veins in his neck bulging. I could see the terror. "This is my house," he roared, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the snot and the sweat. "You cannot do this. It is my house." I lowered the window 2 in. The cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of his fear. I looked at him. I touched the bandage on my cheek. "It was never your house, Bradley," I said softly. "It was my house, and I decided I didn't want tenants who beat their landlords. Fix this." He begged, his voice dropping to a sob. "Dad, please." Sergey the Loan Sharks. They know where I live. If I don't have the house, if I don't have the money, that sounds like a personal problem, I said. I rolled the window up. He pounded on the glass, screaming incoherent, please. I put the car in drive and pulled away, leaving him standing in the middle of the dark street. A king without a castle, a son without a father, watching the tail lights of his last chance disappear into the night. The flashing blue and red lights of the Chicago police cruiser bounced off the snowbanks, creating a strobe effect that made the scene look like a disjointed nightmare. I sat in my warm car 3 houses down watching the cavalry arrive. But they were not the cavalry Bradley expected. He thought they were his saviors coming to restore his kingdom. He did not know they were simply the witnesses to his final dethroning. 2 officers stepped out of the squad car. They were big men bundled in heavy coats, their breath steaming in the frigid air. They had their hands resting near their holsters, not because they expected a shootout, but because they were responding to a high-priority alarm call at a multi-million-dollar property. They walked with the heavy, deliberate steps of men who had seen every kind of domestic dispute the city could offer. Bradley ran toward them like a drowning man spotting a lifeline. He was waving his arms, his coat flapping open his face, a mask of red, frozen rage. "Officer, thank God you are here!" Bradley screamed, pointing a shaking finger at the Titan security guards standing like statues on the porch. "Arrest them!" They broke in. They changed the locks. They are holding my house hostage. The lead officer, a sergeant with a gray mustache and eyes that looked like they had not slept in a decade, held up a gloved hand. He did not look at the guards. He looked at the hysterical man screaming in the middle of the street. "Calm down, sir," the sergeant said, his voice flat and commanding. "Lower your voice. What is the situation here?" "This is my house," Bradley yelled. He was hyperventilating now, the panic finally overtaking the anger. "I came home from work and these goons boarded up my windows. They stole my keys. They are trespassing. You have to get them out. I want them in handcuffs." The sergeant looked past Bradley at the house. He saw the steel security door. He saw the black plywood bolted over the windows. He saw the Titan security SUV blocking the driveway. It did not look like a break-in. It looked like a foreclosure. It looked like a professional job. He walked past Bradley up the driveway. The Titan guard, the one named Brutus, did not flinch. He did not reach for a weapon. He simply reached into his tactical vest and pulled out the same plastic sleeve he had shown Bradley. Officer Brutus said calmly, "We are Titan Security. We are contracted by the property owners to secure the site. We have a valid deed and a writ of possession." The sergeant took the papers. He pulled a flashlight from his belt and shone it on the documents. He read them slowly. He checked the dates. He checked the notary stamps. He checked the signatures. Bradley was hovering behind him, hopping from foot to foot in the snow. "Tell them," Officer Bradley spat. "Tell them to get off my property." The sergeant lowered the flashlight. He handed the papers back to Brutus. He turned around slowly to face my son. "Sir, do you have any identification?" the sergeant asked. Bradley blinked. "What, of course I do." He fumbled for his wallet with numb fingers. He pulled out his driver's license. "Here, look at the address. It says right there, 1400 Lakeshore Drive. That is me. I live here." The sergeant took the license. He walked back to his cruiser. He spent 5 minutes on the radio. I could not hear what was being said, but I knew the script. He was running the name against the Cook County Property Records database. He was checking the current title status. 5 minutes is a long time when you are standing in the freezing wind, waiting for the world to right itself. Vanessa was huddled next to Bradley, shivering violently, her teeth chattering. She looked small. She looked broken. The sergeant stepped out of the cruiser. He walked back to Bradley. His demeanor had changed. He was no longer investigating a break-in. He was managing a disturbance. "Mr. Ford," the sergeant said, handing back the license. "According to the county records updated this afternoon, you are not the owner of this property." What Bradley gasped, "That is a mistake." My father owns it. Garrison Ford and I am his son. I have lived here for 5 years. The sergeant shook his head. The previous owner was a corporate entity called Bulldog Holdings. The current owner, as of 2:14 p.m. today, is Titan Demolition Group. Your name is not on the deed. Your father's name is not on the deed. Bradley looked like he had been slapped. He staggered back. No, that is impossible. You have to call my father. He wouldn't do this. Sir? The sergeant continued, his voice losing its patience. The paperwork is in order. You are technically trespassing. The new owners have secured the property. If you have a dispute with the sale, that is a civil matter for the courts. Right now, you need to leave the premises. Leave! Bradley shrieked. Where am I supposed to go? My stuff is in there. That was the trigger for Vanessa. She pushed past Bradley, grabbing the sergeant's arm. Her eyes were wide, manic. My things, she screamed. My closet. I have $50,000 worth of clothes in there. My jewelry, my bags. You have to let me in to get my things. They cannot just lock us out from our own lives. The sergeant looked at Brutus. The guard stepped forward. Officer, the property was purchased as his vacant possession. The contract explicitly states that any personal property remaining on site at the time of transfer is considered abandoned. Refuse. Refuse, Vanessa whispered. The word hung in the air like a curse. We cleared the structure immediately upon possession. Brutus continued, his voice devoid of any empathy. The contents have been removed and disposed of in accordance with city sanitation codes. Disposed of, Vanessa shrieked. Her knees gave out. She collapsed into the snow, not fainting but crumbling under the weight of the realization. You threw it away. You threw my Hermes bags in the trash. It is in a landfill by now, ma'am, Brutus said. No, Vanessa wailed. She clawed at the snow. My shoes, my wedding dress, my life. The sergeant looked uncomfortable. He was used to domestic violence and drunk drivers, not the destruction of a luxury lifestyle. Look, folks, the sergeant said, trying to de-escalate. If they threw your stuff out, you can sue them for damages. But I cannot let you in. The house is sealed. It is a construction site now. You need to clear the area. You are blocking the road and disturbing the peace. Bradley grabbed the sergeant's lapel. A fatal mistake. You do not understand, he yelled, shaking the officer. You have to arrest them. They stole my life. The sergeant reacted instantly. He slapped Bradley's hand away and shoved him back against the hood of the BMW. Do not touch me. The sergeant barked, his hand resting on his taser. Step back or you go in the back of the car. Bradley froze. The reality of the badge and the gun finally pierced through his entitlement. He raised his hands slowly. He was shaking. Tears were streaming down his face, freezing on his cheeks. He looked at the house. The boarded-up windows stared back like dead eyes. He looked at Vanessa, sobbing in the slush, ruining the only outfit she had left. And then he looked at the street again. He pointed a trembling finger at my car. He did this. Bradley screamed, his voice cracking. My father, he is right there. He is watching. The sergeant shone his flashlight at my car. The beam hit my face, illuminating the bruises, the swollen eye, the split lip. I did not look away. I stared right back at the light. The sergeant squinted. He saw a battered old man sitting alone in the dark. He saw the physical evidence of the 30 slaps, even from 20 FT away. He lowered the light. He looked back at Bradley, the young, healthy man screaming in the street. He made his judgment. Sir, get in your car and leave. The sergeant said, his voice hard. I am not going to ask again. If you harass that man or try to enter this property one more time, I will arrest you for disorderly conduct and trespassing, but he is my father. He is it, Bradley sobbed. I do not care who he is. The sergeant said, go now. Bradley stood there for a long moment. He looked at the house. He looked at me. He looked at the ruins of his arrogance. He grabbed Vanessa by the arm and hauled her up. She was limp dead weight. He shoved her into the passenger seat of the BMW. He got into the driver's side. He started the engine. He revved it aggressively, a final pathetic display of power from a man who had none. He peeled out tires spinning on the ice, fishtailing dangerously before speeding down the street, disappearing into the gloom. The sergeant watched him go. He shook his head. He exchanged a few words with Brutus, then got back into his cruiser and drove off, leaving the street silent again. I sat there for a moment longer. The show was over. The stage was cleared. I thought about the Hermes bags in the dump truck. I thought about the gaming console. I thought about the entitlement that had lived in that house. It was all garbage now. My face hurt. My heart hurt. But my conscience was clear. I put the car in gear. I had one more stop to make. The night was young, and the destruction of Bradley Ford was only just beginning. He had lost his shelter. Now he needed to lose his hope. And I knew exactly where to find the man who held the rest of his debt. I drove away, leaving the steel-clad fortress behind. It was no longer a home. It was a monument to consequences. And tomorrow the wrecking ball would finish the job. I watched the city lights blur past the tinted window of the black Lincoln Town car Jared had summoned. We were not going to a steakhouse anymore. The adrenaline had faded, replaced by the throbbing ache in my face and the bone-deep weariness of a man who had just performed an amputation on his own family tree. But the night was not done with me. As we pulled up to the curb in front of Jared's office building downtown, I saw a familiar figure pacing frantically under the street lamps. It was Bradley. Of course it was. He knew Jared was my lawyer. He knew this was the nerve center of my operations. He was shivering in his unbuttoned coat, his face red from the cold, and the screaming, looking like a man who had just watched his winning lottery ticket burn to ash. He saw the car. He stopped pacing, his eyes locked onto mine through the glass, wide and manic. I opened the door. The cold air rushed in, biting at my exposed skin. I planted my hickory cane on the icy sidewalk and hoisted myself up. My body felt heavy old, but my resolve was lighter than air. I stepped out into the wind. The collar of my coat turned up against the chill. Bradley rushed toward me. He did not run like a son running to a father. He ran like a creditor running to a debtor. He slipped on a patch of black ice, stumbled right at himself, and came to a halt 3 ft away, his chest heaving. "Dad," he choked out, breath clouding in the freezing air. "What the hell are you doing? You sold my house. You threw my wife on the street. Are you insane?" I did not answer. I did not blink. I just looked at him. I looked at the man who had struck me 30 times less than 24 hours ago. I looked at the hands that were now clenched in fists at his sides. The same hands that had left the purple contusions blooming across my cheekbone. I leaned on my cane, letting the silence stretch between us like a loaded rubber band. Jared West stepped out of the car behind me. He moved smoothly, stepping between me and my son. He was not a big man, but he carried the weight of the law in his posture. He held 2 thick, cream-colored envelopes in his gloved hand. "Mr. Ford," Jared said, his voice cutting through the wind like a razor. "Step back." Bradley ignored him. He tried to look around. Jared tried to catch my eye. "Dad, talk to me. Stop hiding behind your lawyer. We need to fix this." Sergey called me. "Do you understand? He knows I lost the house. He's going to kill me." I stayed silent. I let his panic wash over me. It was not my storm anymore. Jared took a step forward, forcing Bradley to retreat. Bradley listened to me very carefully. Jared said, "Your father is not going to speak to you. Not tonight, not tomorrow, likely not ever again." Bradley scoffed a desperate, hysterical sound. "That is bull. He is my father. He can't just cut me off." Jared extended the first envelope. This is a temporary restraining order granted by Judge Harmon an hour ago. Jared said, it is based on the emergency room report detailing the assault and battery Garrison Ford sustained last night. The bruising, the split lip, the concussion protocol. Bradley stared at the envelope. He did not take it. Take it, Jared said. It orders you to stay 500 FT away from Garrison Ford at all times. It orders you to cease all communication, no calls, no texts, no emails. If you violate this order, you will be arrested immediately. Bradley's face crumbled. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. His eyes. Dad, it was a mistake. I told you I was stressed. I didn't mean to hurt you. I tapped my cane on the pavement once. A sharp final sound. I did not speak. Jared thrust the envelope into Bradley's chest. Bradley grabbed it reflexively. And this, Jared said, holding up the second envelope. This is from the accounting department of Bulldog Holdings. Bradley looked confused. What? For the past 5 years, Jared explained his tone, dry and clinical. You have occupied the property at 1400 Lakeshore Drive, Rontray. You believed this was a gift. However, there was never a gift letter signed. In the absence of such documentation, the IRS views that free rent is either a loan or taxable income. Bradley blinked. I don't understand. Garrison has decided to classify the past 60 months of unpaid rent valued at $10,000 a month as a forgiven debt, Jared said. I saw the moment the math hit Bradley's brain. 60 months, $10,000 a month, $600,000. Forgiven debt is considered taxable income by the IRS. Jared delivered the kill shot. This envelope contains a Form 1099-C cancellation of debt. We are filing it with the IRS tomorrow morning. You now owe federal and state income taxes on $600,000 of income for this tax year. Bradley's jaw dropped. No, you can't do that. That is hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes. I don't have that kind of money. Then I suggest you get a good accountant, Jared said. Or a good public defender because the IRS is far less forgiving than your father was. Bradley looked at the 2 envelopes in his hands. One ordered him to stay away. The other buried him in debt he could never pay. He looked up at me. Tears were freezing on his face now. Why, he whispered, why are you doing this? I looked at him one last time. I touched the bruise on my face. I remembered the count. 29:30, I turned my back on him. I got back into the car. I slammed the door, shutting out the cold, shutting out the wind, shutting out my son. Jared got in the driver's side. He locked the doors. Drive, I said. As we pulled away, I looked in the side mirror. Bradley was standing alone on the sidewalk, clutching the envelopes to his chest, illuminated by the harsh yellow streetlights. He looked small. He looked defeated. He looked like a stranger. I felt a tear run down my good cheek. I wiped it away, angry at myself. I wasn't crying for him. I was crying for the time I had wasted protecting a man who would have happily watched me bleed. The restraining order was the shield. The tax bill was the sword. I had armed myself with the law, and I had struck back with the precision of a demolition expert. But the night wasn't over. Bradley was ruined, but the vultures were still circling. He had mentioned Sergei the loan shark. Bradley was desperate, and a desperate man with a gambling addiction and a death threat hanging over his head does dangerous things. Where to now? Jared asked, his voice soft. My new apartment, I said. I need to sleep. But I knew I wouldn't sleep. I knew Bradley wouldn't go to a hotel. He wouldn't go to a shelter. He would go to the only person left who he thought he could manipulate. He would go back to Vanessa. And when he realized she had abandoned him too, when he realized he was truly completely alone, that was when the real danger would begin. I watched the city pass by steel and glass and concrete, strong things, durable things, things that didn't break when you hit them. I needed to be like them. I checked my watch. 8:00 p.m. The game was entering the final quarter, and I was going to make sure the clock ran out on him, not me. I wasn't in the room with them when they checked into the Starlight Motel on the outskirts of the city, but I did not need to be. I knew the script by heart because I had spent 30 years watching them rehearse it. They did not go to the Four Seasons. They did not go to the Ritz. They went to the only place that accepted cash and did not ask for a credit card pre-authorization because Bradley's cards were already dead plastic. The Starlight was a place where dreams went to die on synthetic bedspreads that smelled of stale smoke and regret. It was fitting. It was my private investigator later filled in the blanks with security footage and witness statements from the night clerk, but I could imagine the scene with crystal clarity. Bradley likely parked the BMW in the shadows, hoping the repo man would not spot it before morning. Vanessa would have walked into the room wearing her ruined spa clothes, clutching her purse, like it was the crown jewels looking at the peeling wallpaper with the horror of a queen exiled to a dungeon. "This is it," she would have screamed. "This is where we are staying." "Are you kidding me, Bradley?" "It is just for one night," Bradley would have pleaded, his voice cracking with exhaustion. "Just until I sort this out. I will call the bank in the morning. It is a mistake. Dad is just throwing a tantrum. He will calm down." He was still lying. Even at rock bottom, he was trying to dig a basement. The conflict started when they tried to order food. They were hungry. They were cold. They wanted comfort. Bradley pulled out his phone to order delivery. He tapped in the order. Pizza wings, expensive comfort food. Transaction declined. He tried another card, the corporate Amex I let him use for business expenses, declined, account closed by administrator. He tried his personal debit card, the one linked to the account where I deposited his salary, for the no-show job at the subsidiary. Insufficient funds. Vanessa watched him. She sat on the edge of the bed, refusing to take off her coat. She watched his thumb hitting the screen harder and harder, as if force could generate credit. "It is not working, is it?" she asked. Her voice was not hysterical anymore. It was cold. It was the voice of a woman calculating her exit strategy. "The system is down," Bradley lied. "Stop lying," she snapped. She stood up and grabbed his phone. She opened his banking app. She forced his face in front of the screen to unlock it. She scrolled. She looked at the zeros. She looked at the overdraft fees. She looked at the transaction history. "Where is the money, Brad?" she demanded. "You told me you had $50,000 in savings. You told me you were getting a bonus." "I spent it," he muttered. "On what?" "On things. On debts. Gambling," she whispered. "You gambled it." And then she scrolled further. She saw the deposits. Monthly transfers from Garrison Ford. Monthly transfers from Bulldog Holdings. She saw the payments for the Range Rover. She saw the payments for her gym membership. She looked up at him, and the realization hit her harder than the cold wind outside. "You do not pay for anything, do you?" She said, "Your dad pays for everything. The car, the house, the insurance, even my phone bill." "He helps out," Bradley defended weakly. "He is my father." "That is what fathers do." "He does not help out," she screamed, throwing the phone at him. "He owns you, and he just cut you off. We have nothing. You are nothing without him." "I am a director of sales," Bradley shouted back, trying to salvage his ego. "I have a job. You have a title," she spat. "You think your dad didn't arrange that too? You think you actually earned that corner office? You are a joke, Bradley, and now you are a broke joke." Bradley sat on the floor, his back against the graffiti-stained wall. He put his head in his hands. "Don't leave me, Ness," he sobbed. "Please, I can fix this. I have assets." "What assets?" "The clothes in the dumpster." "I have the watch," he said. He fumbled with his wrist. He unclasped the heavy gold Rolex Submariner he wore every day. The watch he flashed in meetings. The watch he told everyone cost $30,000. "Take it," he said, holding it out to her. "Sell it. It is worth 20 grand easy. Take it and get a hotel room. I will sleep in the car, just don't leave me. Vanessa looked at the watch. It glittered in the flickering fluorescent light of the motel room. It looked heavy. It looked expensive. She took it. She weighed it in her hand. She looked at him with a mixture of pity and disgust. "You are pathetic," she said. She put the watch in her purse. She didn't say thank you. She didn't say I love you. She sat back down on the bed and stared at the door. Bradley thought he had bought her loyalty for one more night. He thought the watch was his salvation. He didn't know that the watch was a fake. I knew. I was there when he bought it in Chinatown 5 years ago for $200. He wanted to look rich without spending the money. It was the perfect metaphor for his life. A shiny exterior with cheap plastic gears inside. He fell asleep eventually. The exhaustion, the stress, the adrenaline crash, it all took him down. He passed out on the floor curled up in his coat near the radiator. That was when Vanessa made her move. I can picture it perfectly. The silence of the room broken only by Bradley's snoring. Vanessa standing up. She didn't pack a bag because she had no bag to pack. All her things were gone, but she still had her survival instinct. She walked over to Bradley's sleeping form. She didn't look at his face. She reached into his coat pocket. She pulled out his wallet. She took the $60 in cash he had left. She took his driver's license just to be cruel. Then she reached into his other pocket and took the keys. Not the keys to the BMW. The BMW was leased in my name, and she knew I would report it stolen by morning. She took the keys to the white Range Rover. That car was the only thing I had foolishly put in her name as a wedding gift. I paid the monthly notes, but the title was hers. It was the only asset she had left. She walked to the door. She opened it quietly, letting in the sliver of orange street light. She looked back at her husband one last time. She didn't leave a note. She didn't leave an apology. She just left. She walked out into the parking lot. She got into the Range Rover. She started the engine. She didn't turn on the headlights until she was on the main road. She drove away, leaving Bradley alone on the floor of a cheap motel with nothing but the clothes on his back and a debt he couldn't pay. When she got to the pawn shop the next morning to sell the Rolex, she would find out it was worthless. She would scream. She would probably throw it in the gutter. But for now, she drove into the night thinking she had won a small victory. She was wrong. She hadn't won anything. She was just running away from the blast radius. I sat in my apartment staring at the city skyline. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from the tracking device on the Range Rover. Vehicle moving. Heading west on I-90, speed. She was running good. That left Bradley alone, completely exposed. When he woke up in that motel room, he would reach for his wife and find empty air. He would reach for his watch and find a bare wrist. He would reach for his car keys and find an empty pocket. He would realize that the only person who had ever actually stuck by him was the father he had slapped 30 times. And he would realize that Bridge wasn't just burned, it was nuked. I took a sip of water. My throat was dry. The silence in my apartment was heavy, but it was clean. It was the silence of order. Tomorrow the real pain would start for him. Tomorrow the loan sharks would realize he had lost his collateral. Tomorrow his boss would receive the dossier I had compiled about his embezzlement of company expense accounts. But for tonight I just watched the dot on the map move away, and I waited for the sun to rise on a brand new world. A world where Bradley Ford was about to learn that rock bottom has a basement. Tuesday morning broke over Chicago with a gray, oppressive sky that matched the color of the pavement. I was sitting in my new penthouse apartment overlooking the river, sipping black coffee and monitoring the police scanner apps and local news feeds. I knew Bradley knew I knew his patterns. After waking up alone on the floor of the Starlight Motel, realizing his wife had abandoned him and his bank accounts were frozen, he would do the only thing he knew how to do. He would go to work. He would put on his wrinkled suit, splash cold water on his face in the motel sink, and drive his BMW into the city, hoping that the glass walls of his office would protect him from the reality of his life. He believed his job was his sanctuary. He believed his title of director of sales gave him immunity. He thought that as long as he was wearing a tie and sitting behind a desk, he was safe from the consequences of his actions. He was wrong. The corporate world does not offer sanctuary. It offers liability management. And Bradley Ford was about to become a massive liability. My private investigator had informed me at 8:00 a.m. that 2 black SUVs had been spotted idling outside the boarded-up mansion on Lakeshore Drive. Men had gotten out. They had inspected the steel door. They had looked at the Titan demolition signs. These were not curious neighbors. These were Sergei Vulov's associates. They were debt collectors who did not work on commission. They worked on intimidation. They saw the house. They saw the plywood. They realized instantly that their collateral, the $2 million asset Bradley had undoubtedly bragged about owning the asset he had likely pledged against his $285,000 gambling debt, had evaporated overnight. They did not call him. They did not text him. They drove straight to the financial district. I wasn't there to see it, but I received the play-by-play from my contacts in the building security. At 10:15 a.m., Bradley was in the middle of a team meeting in the main glass-walled conference room. He was trying to project confidence, trying to pretend he hadn't spent the night on a dirty carpet, trying to pretend his father hadn't erased his existence. The elevator doors on the 40th floor dinged. 2 men stepped out. They were not wearing business suits. They were wearing leather jackets and expressions that made the receptionist drop her phone. They didn't stop at the desk. They walked straight past security, pushing through the glass double doors. Bradley saw them coming. Witnesses said he turned the color of old milk. He stood up, knocking his chair over. He tried to run toward the back exit, but there was nowhere to go. The conference room was a fishbowl. The first man, a giant with a shaved head, kicked the door open. The sound shattered the polite hum of the office. "Mr. Ford," the man said. His voice was low, but it carried across the entire floor. "We need to talk about your real estate portfolio." "Please," Bradley stammered, backing up against the whiteboard. "Not here." "Please, guys, let's go outside. I have the money. It is coming today. My father is wiring it. He was still using my name. Still using me as a shield even after I had thrown him to the wolves." The second man didn't speak. He just walked up to Bradley and punched him. It wasn't a movie punch. It was a professional, efficient strike to the solar plexus. Bradley folded in half, gasping for air, retching on the carpet in front of his entire sales team. The man grabbed Bradley by the hair and slammed his face into the mahogany conference table. Blood splattered onto the quarterly projection charts. "Where is the house, Bradley?" the man asked calmly. "Where is our collateral? It is sold." Bradley shrieked, blood bubbling from his nose. "He sold it. I didn't know." The man hit him again, a sharp blow to the ribs. I imagined it felt very similar to the pain in my own chest, only Bradley didn't have the luxury of morphine. Security finally arrived, but they didn't intervene physically. They just stood back and radioed the police. Volkov's men knew exactly how much time they had. They dropped Bradley to the floor like a sack of wet cement. "Consider this a late fee," the bald man said. "You have 24 hours or next time we take a finger." They walked out. They didn't run. They took the elevator down to the lobby and disappeared into the city traffic before the police sirens even grew loud. Bradley was left lying in a pool of his own blood, surrounded by his horrified colleagues. He tried to stand up. He tried to wipe his face with his sleeve. He looked at his boss, the vice president of operations, a man who valued quarterly earnings above human life. "I can explain," Bradley wheezed. "It is a misunderstanding. The VP didn't offer him a hand. He didn't ask if he needed an ambulance. He looked at the blood on the table. He looked at the traumatized staff. He looked at the liability. "You are fired, Ford," the VP said coldly. "Get your things and get out." Security escorted him to the street. "But I need this job," Bradley begged. "You brought the mob into my office," the VP snapped. "You are done. You are blacklisted. Get him out of here before the cops arrive. I don't want them interviewing my staff." Two security guards grabbed Bradley by his arms. They didn't let him pack a box. They didn't let him grab his coat. They dragged him through the lobby past the staring eyes of the people he used to boss around and threw him out onto the sidewalk. He landed on the concrete right where the smokers stood. He was bleeding, he was unemployed, he was homeless, and he had a death mark on his head. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Jared. It was a text. "Incident at the office. He is out. Terminated for cause." Police report filed for assault, but suspects fled. Bradley is on the street. I walked to the window of my penthouse. I looked down at the city. It was ruthless. It was beautiful in its cruelty. He had lost the roof over his head at 600 p.m. yesterday. He had lost his wife at 300 a.m. this morning. And now at 10:30 a.m., he had lost his identity. He was no longer Bradley Ford, the successful executive. He was just a guy who owed money to the wrong people. I took a sip of coffee. It tasted bitter but good. He was stripped bare. He had nothing left to hide behind. No house, no job, no spouse, no father. Now he would have to face the world as himself. And I suspected he was about to find out that Bradley Ford, without my money backing him up, wasn't worth the price of the suit he was bleeding on. I checked the time. He had 24 hours, according to the loan sharks. That meant he had about 6 hours before the panic turned into primal desperation. I sat down and waited. I knew where he would come. He had nowhere else to go. He would come to the source. He would come to me, and when he did, I would be ready with the final lesson. The one that would cost him more than just money. The intercom on the wall of my new penthouse buzzed at 8:45 p.m. It was a harsh electronic sound that sliced through the quiet jazz playing softly in the background. I was expecting it. A man like Bradley does not just disappear into the night. He claws, he scratches, he hunts for the softest target he knows. I walked over and pressed the button. "Mr. Ford." The doorman's voice was tense. "There is a man here who says he is your son. He is, well, sir, he is in bad shape. He says it is a medical emergency. Should I call the police?" I looked at the monitor. The camera showed a distorted black and white image of the lobby. Bradley was leaning against the marble desk. He looked like a specter. His suit jacket was torn. His face was a swollen mask of dried blood and fresh bruises. He was shaking so hard, the camera picked up the vibrations. "Send him up," I said. I unlocked the door and left it ajar. I walked back to the living room and sat in my armchair facing the entrance. I placed my cane across my lap. I waited. I heard the elevator ding. I heard the heavy footsteps dragging down the hallway. The door creaked open. Bradley stumbled in. He didn't look at the view of the river. He didn't look at the expensive art. He looked straight at me. His eyes were bloodshot, wild, and terrified. He took 3 steps and collapsed. He didn't faint. He fell to his knees. He crawled the last few feet across the hardwood floor until he was right in front of me. He reached out to grab my leg, but I shifted the cane, blocking him. "Do not touch me," I said. "Dad," he sobbed. His voice was a wet gurgle. "You have to help me. They are going to kill me." I looked down at him. "How did you find me, Bradley? I hired a guy." He wheezed. "A PI. I used the last $500 I had in my pocket. I had to find you. Dad, please. You have to listen." He tried to wipe his face with his sleeve, but only smeared more blood across his cheek. It was the alcohol. Daddy started the litany of excuses spilling out like vomit. I was drunk. You know how I get when I drink scotch? I blacked out. "I didn't mean to hit you. I swear to God, I didn't mean it. It was the stress. The quotas at work. Vanessa, she was pressuring me. She made me crazy. Dad, she wanted the money. I was just trying to keep her happy. He was blaming the whiskey. He was blaming the job. He was blaming the wife he had abandoned in a motel room. He was blaming everyone but the man in the mirror. I am not a bad person. He cried, tears cutting tracks through the grime on his face. I am your son. I am the little boy you took fishing. Remember Lake Geneva. You can't let them kill me. Who is them? I asked, my voice flat. Vulov, he whispered. The name made him shudder. Sergei Vulov. His guys came to the office. Dad, they beat me. They embarrassed me. They said if I don't have the $285,000 by tomorrow morning, they are going to start cutting pieces off me. He held up his hands. They were trembling violently. They said they will take my thumbs first. Dad, I need my hands. I can't work without my hands. Please just write the check. I will pay you back. I swear I will. I will get a new job. I will go to meetings. I will do whatever you want. Just save me one last time. He put his head on the floor, his forehead touching the toe of my shoe. He was prostrating himself. It was a performance of absolute submission. I watched him. I looked for a single spark of genuine remorse. I looked for a sign that he was sorry for the pain he caused me. Not just the pain he was feeling. I saw nothing. I saw a man who was sorry he got caught. I saw a man who was sorry his safety net had snapped. I saw a manipulator playing his final card, the pity card. You hired a private investigator, I said slowly. Instead of paying your debt, instead of buying food, instead of getting a hotel room, you used your last dime to hunt me down so you could beg. I had no choice, he wailed, looking up. You are the only one who can fix this. You have millions, Dad. This is nothing to you. It is pocket change. Why are you being so cruel? It is just money. Just money. That was the phrase that sealed it. To him, it was just money. To me, it was 40 years of freezing mornings on construction sites. It was missed birthdays. It was back surgeries and ulcers. It was my life encoded in dollars. He didn't want a father. He wanted an ATM that breathed. I leaned forward. The leather of my chair creaked. Bradley stopped crying for a second, hope flaring in his eyes. He thought I was reaching for my checkbook. He thought the old man was cracking. He thought the tears had worked. Get up, I said. He scrambled to his feet, wiping his nose. You will do it. Thank you, Dad. Thank you. I knew you wouldn't let me die. I knew you loved me. I stood up facing him. I was eye level with him now. I saw the relief washing over him. The arrogance was already starting to creep back in. He was already thinking about how he would spin this to his friends, how he played the old man one last time. I didn't say I would pay it, I said. Bradley froze. What I said, get up because you are ruining my rug. Bradley's face twisted. Confusion turned to anger, then back to terror. Dad, stop playing games. They're going to cut my fingers off. I walked past him. I walked to the wet bar. I poured a glass of water. I drank it slowly while he watched me. You said it was the alcohol, I said, turning back to him. You said you didn't mean it. You said it was just stress. Yes. He nodded frantically. Yes, exactly. I was not myself. I walked over to the side table where my laptop sat connected to the massive flat-screen television mounted on the wall. I want to show you something, Bradley, I said. I want to show you exactly who you are when you think no one is watching. I tapped a key on the laptop. The television screen flickered to life. Bradley looked at the screen. He frowned. What is this, just watch? I said. And then I pressed play. The video that filled the screen was high definition. It was stable and it was damning. It was the footage Vanessa had recorded on her phone the night of the party. The footage I had extracted from her cloud account, After finding her discarded laptop in the trash pile, it showed everything: the locked door, the taunting, and then the first slap. 1, Bradley stared at the screen. He watched himself strike his father. 2, he watched himself scream, "Sign it, old man." 3, he watched the blood spray from my lip. He turned to me. His face was the color of ash. "Dad, turn it off." "No, I said we are going to watch all 30, and then I am going to tell you what I did with this video 10 minutes before you walked in the door." The sound of my own flesh breaking filled the penthouse living room, amplified by the surround sound speakers. It was a wet, sharp crack that echoed off the floor to ceiling windows. On the screen, the high-definition image was brutal. Bradley's face was twisted into a snarl of pure, animalistic rage. My face was a mask of shock and blood. 4, 5, 6. Bradley covered his ears. "Stop it," he screamed. "Turn it off. I cannot watch this. You are going to watch it." I said, my voice cutting through the noise of the recording. "You enjoyed doing it. You should enjoy seeing it." 7, 8, 9. He fell back against the wall, sliding down, until he was sitting on the floor, hugging his knees. He looked like a child hiding from a thunderstorm. But there was no thunder here, just the evidence of his own cruelty. "Where did you get this?" he whispered. "Vanessa, she recorded it." "But she has the phone." "She does," I said, watching the screen as the virtual Bradley delivered a backhand that sent my glasses flying. "But she left her laptop behind in the purge. She threw it in the trash pile with the rest of her life. She forgot that her cloud account syncs automatically. She wanted a souvenir of her husband putting the old man in his place. Instead, she gave me the hammer to nail your coffin shut." 10, 11, 12. The violence on the screen was relentless. It wasn't a fight. A fight implies 2 people participating. This was a beating. This was elder abuse. This was a felony and 4K resolution. Bradley looked up at me. His eyes were streaming tears. "Dad, please. I see it. I see I was a monster. I admit it. I am sorry. I will go to counseling. I will do anything. Just turn it off and write the check. Vulov, he is probably on his way here. He tracked my phone. If he finds me here and I don't have the money, he still didn't get it. He still thought this was a negotiation. He still thought this was about leverage. He thought I was showing him the video to shame him into submission so I could play the benevolent savior one last time." 13, 14, 15. I paused the video. The image froze on Bradley's fist raised. Mid-strike, his face contorted in a scream of hatred. "You think I showed you this to teach you a lesson?" I asked. "Yes." Bradley nodded eagerly, wiping his bloody nose. "Yes. You wanted me to see how bad I got. I see it, Dad. I promise. I am changed now. Please help me." I walked over to the window. The city lights below were indifferent. Millions of people living their lives, paying their bills, respecting their parents. And then there was my son. "I didn't show you this to teach you," I said, turning back to him. "I showed you this so you would know exactly what the jury is going to see." Bradley froze. "Jury, I sent this video to Detective Miller at the 1st District 20 minutes ago," I said calmly, along with a sworn affidavit detailing the assault, the extortion, and the threats against my life. Bradley scrambled to his feet. You called the cops on your own son." "You are not my son," I said. "My son died the minute you raised your hand to me. You are just a criminal who broke into my home and battered a senior citizen. That video is evidence in a Class 2 felony case, Bradley. Aggravated battery of a senior citizen. In Illinois, that carries a mandatory prison sentence, 3 to 7 years. No, Bradley gasped. You can't send me to prison. I will die in there." "You might," I said, "but at least you will be safe from Vulov." Volkov Bradley's eyes widened. "Oh God, does he know? Did you tell him I walked back to the laptop?" I minimized the video player. I opened my email sent folder. "I didn't just send it to the police," I said. "I sent it to everyone. I sent it to your former boss, so he has cause to deny your unemployment claim. I sent it to Vanessa, so she has grounds for an annulment. And yes, I sent it to an anonymous tip line that connects directly to Sergei Volkov's organization. You sent it to the loan shark, Bradley screamed. Are you trying to get me killed? No, I said I am trying to destroy your credit rating with the underworld. You see, Bradley, even criminals have a code. They lend money to degenerates. They lend money to losers. But nobody likes a man who beats his own father. It is bad for business. It shows a lack of character. It shows instability. I stepped closer to him. I sent a message with the video. I continued. I told them that you have been cut off. I told them that the Ford family vault is closed. I told them that if they want their money, they better get it from you because I am not paying a dime. And I told them that you are now the subject of a high-profile police manhunt which brings heat. Loan sharks hate heat, Bradley. He stared at me. His mouth hung open. He looked like he had been hollowed out. They won't lend to you now, I said. Nobody will. Not a bank, not a shark, not a friend. You are radioactive. You are the man who beat his father for money and still didn't get paid. That makes you a liability. Bradley fell to his knees again. But this time it wasn't a performance. His legs just gave out. You ruined me, he whispered. You actually ruined me. You did this. I corrected him, pointing at the frozen image on the TV. You did this 30 times. You ruined yourself. I just turned on the light so everyone could see the wreckage. The sound of sirens began to bleed through the heavy glass of the penthouse windows. Faint at first, then growing louder. Blue and red lights began to bounce off the buildings below, reflecting in the glass. They are coming for you, Bradley, I said. He looked at the window. He looked at the door. He looked at me. Dad, he whimpered. Hide me, please. Just hide me in the back room. Don't let them take me. I sat down in my armchair. I picked up my cane. I rested my hands on the handle. I am not hiding you, I said. I buzzed them up 5 minutes ago. The elevator chimed. Bradley spun around. He looked at the heavy oak door of the apartment. He looked like a rat in a trap. He ran toward the balcony door, fumbling with the latch, but it was locked. He ran toward the kitchen looking for a back exit, but there was none. The heavy thud of boots sounded in the hallway. Open up, police. Bradley backed into the corner of the room near the TV where his own image was still frozen in an act of violence. He was shaking so hard his teeth were chattering. He looked at me one last time. There was no anger left in his eyes, only a deep, bottomless terror. Why, he asked, his voice barely a sound. Because I love you enough to stop you, I said. And because I respect myself enough not to let you kill me. The door burst open. 4 officers in tactical gear swarmed the room. Guns were drawn on the ground now. Bradley didn't fight. He dropped to his stomach. He put his hands behind his head. He sobbed into the expensive rug he had bled on earlier. I watched as they cuffed him. I watched as they hauled him up. I watched as they read him his rights. He didn't look at me as they dragged him out. He hung his head, shame finally overtaking him. The lead officer stopped by my chair. Mr. Ford, he asked, are you okay, sir? Do you need a medic? I touched the bruise on my face. It still hurt. It would hurt for a long time. No, officer, I said. I am fine. I just need some peace and quiet. They took him away. The door closed. The sirens faded as they drove him to the precinct. I was alone in my penthouse. The video was still paused on the screen. I picked up the remote and turned off the TV. The room went dark, saved for the city lights outside. I walked to the window. I looked down at the street. I saw the squad car merge into traffic carrying my son away from his debts, away from his mistakes, and away from me. He was safe now in a cage, but safe. Volkov couldn't touch him in county lockup. He would have 3 meals a day. He would have a bed. He would have time to think. It was the most expensive gift I had ever given him. It cost me a house. It cost me my heart, but it might just save his life. I poured myself another glass of water. My hand was steady. The 30 slaps were finished. The count was 0. I took a deep breath, and for the first time in 5 years, I felt the weight lift off my chest. It was over. Now I could finally start rebuilding. Not a skyscraper, not a business, but a life. My life. The silence of the police precinct was different from the silence of my penthouse. It was a busy silence filled with the scratching of pens, the hum of old computers, and the low murmur of misery. I sat in an interrogation room, not as a suspect but as a victim. A detective named Miller sat across from me. He was a young man with tired eyes and a coffee stain on his tie. On the metal table between us lay a tablet playing the video of my son beating me. We watched it together. I had seen it before, but seeing it here in this cold, sterile room gave it a new weight. It was no longer a family tragedy. It was evidence. It was Exhibit A. Detective Miller paused the video at the 15th slap. He looked at me. He looked at the bruises that had turned my face into a topographic map of pain. "Mr. Ford," he said, his voice quiet, "I have been on this job for 12 years. I have seen bar fights, gang shootings, and domestic disputes, but I have never seen something this systematic." He counted them. He literally counted them while he hit you. "He likes to be precise," I said, rubbing my aching jaw. "He is a numbers guy." The door opened and a woman walked in. She was sharp-dressed in a charcoal suit, carrying a leather briefcase that looked heavy enough to crack a skull. She introduced herself as Assistant State Attorney Reynolds. She did not offer me pity. She offered me strategy. "We are not going with simple battery," she announced, sitting down. "We are upgrading the charges. This is aggravated battery of a senior citizen. In Illinois, that is a Class 2 felony. But given the duration of the attack and the premeditated nature of the extortion, we are pushing for Class 1. "What does that mean for him?" I asked. She opened a file. "It means mandatory prison time, Mr. Ford. Probation is not on the table, but that is not all." I watched the video. I counted the strikes. 30, I said 30. She confirmed. Usually in a fight, we charge a single count of battery for the entire incident. But this wasn't a fight. You were seated. You were non-combative. There were pauses between strikes. He had time to stop. He had time to think. He chose to continue 30 separate times. She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto mine. "I am charging him with 30 separate counts of aggravated battery." She said, "1 count for every single time his hand made contact with your face. I am stacking them." I did the math in my head. 30 counts. Even if they ran concurrently, the sentence would be substantial. If they ran consecutively, he would be an old man when he got out. "Is that excessive?" I asked. Not because I wanted to save him, but because I wanted to understand the weapon she was wielding. "He beat his own father for money," Reynolds said coldly. "He filmed it. He mocked you. No jury will think it is excessive. They will think it is justice." We are also adding a charge of attempted extortion and unlawful restraint for locking you in that room. "Mr. Ford, your son is looking at 20 years minimum. 20 years. I nodded. "Do it." 3 days later, I sat in the back row of the Cook County Criminal Court. The room smelled of floor wax and fear. It was arraignment day. The gallery was filled with families of defendants, mothers crying, girlfriends clutching babies. But I was alone. When the bailiff called out the People versus Bradley Ford, the room went quiet. A side door opened. Bradley walked in. He was wearing a bright orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. His wrists were shackled to his waist. His ankles were chained. He shuffled. He looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days. His hair, usually perfectly styled, was matted and greasy. His face was gray. He stood before the judge. He didn't look at the gallery. He kept his eyes on the floor. He was ashamed. Or maybe he was just terrified. The public defender, a frantic, ill-looking man with a stack of files, tried to speak, but the judge cut him off. Reading of the charges, the judge droned. Prosecutor Reynolds stood up. Your Honor, the state charges the defendant with 30 counts of aggravated battery to a senior citizen, 1 count of unlawful restraint, and 1 count of attempted extortion. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. 30 counts? Even the judge looked up over his glasses. 30 counts, counselor? The judge asked. Yes, Your Honor, Reynolds said. We have video evidence of 30 distinct and separate assaults committed over a period of 10 minutes against a vulnerable victim who is the defendant's own father. The defendant is seen counting the blows. The judge looked at Bradley. Is this true? Bradley didn't speak. He just trembled. The public defender tried to argue for bail. He talked about Bradley's lack of prior criminal record. He talked about his standing in the community. He called it a family dispute that got out of hand. Reynolds countered immediately. Your Honor, the defendant has no fixed address. He's just been terminated from his employment. He has significant gambling debts to organized crime figures, making him a severe flight risk. Furthermore, the brutality of the assault captured on video demonstrates a clear and present danger to the victim and the community. The judge nodded. He picked up his gavel. Given the nature of the charges and the flight risk, bail is denied. The judge ruled the defendant will be remanded to the custody of the Cook County Sheriff pending trial. Bradley's head snapped up. No bail. He gasped. He turned around. He scanned the room frantically. He was looking for a savior. He was looking for me. Our eyes met across the rows of wooden benches. I saw the question in his eyes. Help me? I did not move. I did not nod. I simply looked at him. I let him see the bruise on my face. I let him see the damage he had done. The bailiff grabbed Bradley's arm. Let's go forward. Bradley didn't scream this time. He didn't fight. He just sagged. The fight had left him. He let them lead him away. The chains clinking with every step, a slow, rhythmic sound that sounded like a clock counting down the rest of his youth. I walked out of the courtroom. The air outside was still cold, but the sun was shining. I thought about the 30 counts. It was a lot. It was heavy. But so was the betrayal. He was going to prison. He would lose his freedom. He would lose his future. But in a strange, twisted way, he was safe. The loan sharks couldn't get him in solitary confinement. The debts would rot while he sat in a cell. I had saved his life by destroying it. I hailed a cab. I gave the driver the address of my new office. I had work to do. I had a business to run. I had a grandson, Leo, who lived with Bradley's first wife in a small apartment 3 towns over. I hadn't seen him in years because Bradley had forbidden it, using the boy as a pawn. But Bradley wasn't in charge anymore. The king was dead. Long live the king. I took out my phone. I dialed the number for Leo's mother. It was time to redirect the resources. It was time to invest in a Ford who might actually have a future. The legal system had done its job. Now it was time for me to do mine. I wasn't just a victim, I was a survivor. And survivors don't look back at the wreckage, they look at the road ahead. 6 months is a long time in the construction business. It is enough time to break ground, pour a foundation, raise a steel skeleton, and enclose a structure in glass. It is enough time to change a skyline. It is also enough time to bury a past life and build a new one on top of the rubble. I sat on the balcony of my penthouse watching the summer sun glitter off the surface of Lake Michigan. The ice was gone. The gray, oppressive winter sky had been replaced by a brilliant, endless blue. The wind was no longer biting. It was a gentle breeze that smelled of fresh water and expensive sunscreen. My iPad chimed on the glass table next to my coffee. I swiped the screen. The face of an 8-year-old boy filled the frame. He was grinning, missing a front tooth, his face smeared with dirt and happiness. "Hi, Grandpa," Leo shouted, his voice tinny through the speakers. "Look what I got." He held up a plastic gold trophy. It was cheap, it was small, it was magnificent. We won the league. Grandpa Leo beamed. I hit a double. "Mom took me for ice cream." "That is amazing, Leo." I said, my voice soft. "I am proud of you." I looked at the boy. He had my eyes. He had his mother's kindness. He was Bradley's son from his first marriage, the wife Bradley had cheated on and abandoned because she wasn't flashy enough for his sales director lifestyle. For years, Bradley had kept Leo away from me, using access to my grandson as a bargaining chip for money. But Bradley wasn't the gatekeeper anymore. "Did you get the package I sent?" I asked. "Yeah." Leo said, his eyes going wide. "The new glove. It is awesome. Mom says it is too expensive to use in the dirt, but I told her you said it was made for catching. Use it in the dirt." I said, "Get it messy. That is what it is for. Leather gets better when you work it." I watched him talk for another 10 minutes. I listened to his stories about school, about his dog, about his life. I was not just a wallet to him, I was Grandpa. I was the man who called every Sunday. I was the man who set up a trust fund that would ensure he went to college debt-free. I was investing in the future instead of subsidizing a failure. "I love you," Grandpa Leo said before hanging up. "I love you too, kid." The screen went black. I sat back in my chair. The silence of the penthouse was not lonely, it was peaceful. It was the silence of a ledger that had finally been balanced. I took a sip of my coffee. I looked toward the north, toward Lakeshore Drive. I couldn't see the old lot from here, but I knew what it looked like. I had driven past it yesterday. The mansion was gone. Bulldog flippers had moved fast. They had stripped it, gutted it, and bulldozed it in 3 days. Now it was a flat-graded lot surrounded by construction fencing. A sign out front announced the coming of a boutique retail center. My son's kingdom had been erased. There was no monument to his ego left standing, just dirt waiting for a better tenant. Bradley was gone too. The trial had been swift. The video evidence was irrefutable. The 30 counts of aggravated battery combined with the financial fraud and the threats resulted in a sentence that sent a message: 10 years. He was currently residing in the Stateville Correctional Center. He had a bed, he had meals, he had time, and he had safety from Vulov. He wrote me letters one every week. I recognized the handwriting on the envelopes. I did not open them. I put them in a shredder. I did not need to read his apologies or his accusations. I knew who he was. I had seen his true face when he thought he had the power. Vanessa had not fared much better. My private investigator sent me a photo last week. She was working as a waitress at a roadside diner in Gary, Indiana. She looked tired. She looked older than 28. She was wearing a uniform that did not fit and shoes that were made for working, not for walking runways. She was paying off her debts one tip at a time. It was a slow, painful education in reality, but it was an education nonetheless. I touched my cheek. The skin was smooth. The bruises had faded months ago. The split lip had healed, leaving only a tiny white scar that you had to look closely to see. But I knew it was there. I stood up and walked to the railing. I looked down at the city of Chicago. It was a tough city. It broke people who were weak. It broke people who were fake. But it respected people who could take a hit and keep standing. I had lost a son. That was a tragedy. And I would mourn the potential of what he could have been for the rest of my life. But I had found something else. I had found my spine. I had found my dignity. I realized then that violence is a language. When Bradley hit me, he was speaking the language of dominance. He was telling me I was nothing. But when I hit back, I did not use a fist. I used the law. I used the market. I used the truth. One slap might wake a drunk man from a stupor. It might shock him into sobriety, but 30 slaps do not wake a man. They wake a monster. A monster that had been sleeping inside me for years, covered by layers of patience and fatherly love. That monster was not rage. That monster was not hate. That monster was justice. And justice, once awakened, does not go back to sleep until the debt is paid in full. I finished my coffee. I checked my watch. 1945. It was still ticking, strong, steady, reliable. I turned my back on the view and walked inside. I had a meeting with my investment banker in an hour. We were setting up a scholarship fund for underprivileged kids who wanted to learn construction. I was going to build things. I was going to leave a mark. Bradley Ford was history. Garrison Ford was just getting started. We often mistake enabling for love, believing that shielding our children from the world's harsh realities is a kindness. It is not. It is a slow poison that breeds entitlement and rots character. By constantly cushioning my son's falls with my wallet, I robbed him of the strength to stand on his own. I learned the hard way that you cannot buy respect, and you certainly cannot finance a conscience. True parental love isn't about writing checks to cover mistakes. It is about having the courage to let them face the consequences. Sometimes the only way to save someone is to stop swimming for them. If you believe that respect must be earned and justice must be served, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of retribution.